Well, thank you guys for coming out to last session, hopefully the most entertaining one, all about NativeScript testing. Got to start playing this, don't I? A little about me. I've been doing programming for over 20 years. I know a ton of languages and probably more operating systems than you care about. I've written over 20 of the NativeScript plugins. Until Mike and Nick's new book is released, I get to claim I wrote the book on NativeScript. I run the NativeScript Rocks plugins, masters, and community site where you can find a good collection of the plugins that basically automatically pulls them from NPM. I'm a freelance contract developer and trainer in multiple computer fields, languages, basically whatever you want, I can probably do it. You can read my blog at fluentreports.com blog, or follow my Twitter feed, or just email me. So why do testing? Anybody have any answers? There you go, that's a good one. Well, it allows you to detect failures a lot earlier during your code change, and it also allows you to fix bugs earlier while you're actually changing your code, because I don't know how many of you know that if you can find the bug early on while you're working on that code, it's a lot easier to fix than 6 months later when you're looking at your code going, man, I was brilliant at that point, but I can't figure this out. So it's a lot easier to find them when you do it that. And it always allows you to verify your products at a working state. The first thing we're going to talk about is unit testing. Unit testing, basically, for those who, how many of you are aware of unit testing? Let me ask that question, because maybe we don't need to do this. Well, then we don't need to do this. For those who are not aware, though, NativeScript actually has built-in unit testing. It is very simple to install. You do TNS test init, and it will give you a question basically asking you which one of the 3 frameworks you want to use. And you pick it, and it installs everything you need. And then you create your tests in the apps test folder, and then you can do TNS test Android or TNS to iOS, and you're great. Okay, I have a sample app here. If you would like to follow along with the tests and stuff, you can grab it out of my repo. It's a simple, stupid app, but it was good for showing tests. Okay, so let's look at the code. We need to bump that up a little bit more. Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not sure how to do that in PHP Storm. I don't normally change that. Give me 1 sec. There's a billion settings in this theme. Nope. Theme. Oh, appearance. There you go. Is that better? No, I don't think so. Yeah. I guess I should have got some themes and tested on the feed earlier. So which one of the 3 themes you guys like the best? I don't. Okay, let's try that. That's a good idea. Sorry, shrunk this one. Oops, wrong one. Yeah, I know that, and I'm a little nervous, sorry. Okay. There you go. That's better. Now everybody should be able to read it. Let's close that out. And okay. Getting back to the speech. I have chosen Mocha. There's a reason for that. It is a popular testing framework. You can use, like I said before, Jasmine or QUnit with the NativeScript built-in testing. I use Mocha because a ton of our open source projects use Mocha, and the end-to-end testing uses Mocha. So we're going to just walk through this real quick. The really nice thing about the built-in testing in NativeScript is it runs inside your application. So any plugins you add, any added CocoaPods or any added jars or Rs to your application, you can actually test them in your application because the NativeScript testing framework runs inside your application. So what I've done is I have created a library or a small plugin called cards. And what I do is in your testing framework, you have to go to the root path to find wherever you put the library. And so the first thing I do is I require the cards thing. The next step is to actually describe the test. And this allows you to, when it fails, to know which test failed. So the first describe says, this is my cards test. And then you can embed a describe inside of a describe so you can actually group test. So in this case, I'm saying I'm going to run the current card test. And then finally, to actually do the test, you use the it command. And the it command is what runs the test. Or everything inside that function is run. And so in my case, what I did is I reset the deck because it's always better to have your test in a known good state. I told it to give me my card. And then you use the assert equals or assert not equals. There's a ton of different asserts. They're all from the Chia library. There's an open source Chia NPM module that a lot of unit testing uses. And the NativeScript one uses that built in. So I'll give you links later for where you can find out all the different asserts. But in this case, what I'm doing is I'm asserting that my result suit is a spade and my result value is an ace. These testings are pretty straightforward. You just go through them and verify each of the things occur. So my next test was next card. And this one's a little bit more complicated of a test. You can do as complicated a test as you want. Again, I'm resetting the deck. But I'm making it go through the deck of cards 54 times to make sure the wrapping works in it. Because you know what? If it didn't wrap around, there could be a bug. And initially, my code didn't work. And then prior card, and then random card. So like I said, you can do as complicated as you want. In this case, the reason why it checks 5 times is because random actually is not always random. You may get the card again a second time because my library is really stupid. So I go through it 5 times, verify that I at least get 2 different random cards. The minute I get 2 different random cards, I figure, good, the randomization is working. So let's look at this run. And we actually need to switch over. As you can see, it run really, really quick. If you want to see that again, we'll just do it again. Whoops, I just tabbed out. As you can see, the startup logo was the logo for my application because it still is loading my application, but instead of starting your app.js file, it actually starts the testing app.js file. And so, like I said, everything is running inside of the application so you can test everything. When it runs through, it quits out. That way you can use this on like any one of the testing services, or when you do a push to your GitHub, you can have it automatically run a testing system with one of the third-party testing services, so you can just run through the thing. But it does print out the results of what happened. And so you can see right here that it starts the application, get connected, shows you the results of all 6 tests. The NativeScript testing does throw an error at the very end saying that, when it gets disconnected, you can ignore that, but the very last line will tell you success. If it failed, we'll do a small change here so that it will fail. The screen's a lot smaller than I thought. Control save. Let's clear this real quick. And it'll run it through it again, and it should have failed. Well, that's interesting. Oh, that's because I changed the ID. I'm sorry. I don't have any tested chest ID. I have this one. This one will fail. Sorry. Run through test again. Now, what I'm doing here on the bottom screen, you might see me typing T or whatever. This is the watcher for my live edit thing. But you can run TNS test start Android, or I'm sorry, TNS test Android, and it'll start it. My watcher starts the testing a lot faster than the built-in testing thing, and for this demo, I did not want to wait the 5 seconds for it to figure out that it needed to copy one file over. And so you can see here that it showed that it failed, and it shows you where it failed. It goes right here. Cards, next card should have returned a 3 of spades, failed, and then it gives you the assertion, expected of hearts equals spade. And if we look over here, it should have said, it's expected 3 of spades. Yes, 3 of spades. It expected a spades, but it told it that it showed that it got a heart. And so you know right away that this is where something broke. And so right now, because I ran the test, I know, oh man, I just totally messed up. And so we can fix that. Now, the next type of testing I would like to talk about is, we can skip all that, end-to-end testing. Unit testing does allow you to test a lot of your functionality, but even though you've verified each of your pieces of the whole, you haven't verified your whole application worked. End-to-end testing, actually, I use a library called Appium, or an open source project. I'm sorry, it's not a library, a whole big, massive open source project called Appium. It supports web, it supports iOS, it supports Android, it supports all sorts of stuff. But it allows you to do full end-to-end testing of your application. Hristov Deshev, one of the NativeScript engineers, he released a really cool plugin called NativeScript Dev Appium. When I started doing this stuff, it was very complicated, and you had to do a lot of stuff, a lot of setup. But Hristov created a really cool thing. You just do TNS install Appium. It downloads everything and sets everything up. And then all your tests are end up in your EDE folder, which I have here, EDE tests. And so you can stick all your end-to-end tests in this folder. And like I said earlier, the reason why you chose Mocha is because Appium by default uses Mocha. And as far as I know, I don't know if you can change that. There may be a way, but by default it uses Mocha. So in this case, when you install the NativeScript Appium, it gives you a test case, so that way you can just use it and then add your code to it. But the biggest thing you need to know is that you want to set this timeout really large. The one that comes with that Hristov done, and I'm going to submit a pull request later, has the timeout a little bit lower than this. And on Android, it will fail. So that's one of those little gotchas. You might want to bump it up by a 0. It automatically will have the code for the before. That basically sets up the connection to Appium. And then the after, which sets up saying we're done with the test, everything is fine. Like before, you set up everything in your it. So it should find the card title. And then you use, there's 2 commands that you can use in Appium for NativeScript, or for Android or iOS applications, I should say. Appium actually offers a huge number of different elements by things like a class name and stuff. Those do not work on the native platform because class name is not stored in the native element. So there's no way for it to find it. So there's element by accessibility ID, and then there's also elements by XPath. There's actually, I should also note that there's element by accessibility and elements by accessibility. If you do element, you're asking it to return one element and only one element. If you're telling it elements, then it'll return all the elements. And so that's the difference. It's just basically add an S if you need more than one. So let's run this test real quick. Now, Appium is a slow, it takes a while for it to boot. It doesn't take very long for the app to start, but wait for Appium. That is one thing, is Appium is a massive program, like I said. Oh, good, it started. But in a minute, it should say, okay, it's running the Carter app tests. So it's actually loaded my file in. And still thinking. Oh, now it automatically starts the app itself. So it says, should find the card title, should flip the card over, should increase in value, should become hearts. So it ran all 4 of these tests in here, and then it says all 4 passed. That is one thing you need to be aware of. Appium is slow to load. Once it actually loads, it actually can run through those tests way faster than a human can. But the initial loading time actually is pretty long, and so that's one of those tests you still probably want to run on automation, but you don't necessarily want to run it every single time you do a you get commit, unless you only commit infrequently. If you commit all the time, like every minor change, you probably want to set up your hooks to only run it once every 10 times or something, because it does take some serious time to start up. And let's go through these tests real quick so you can see how this worked. My card library returns actually a letter Q. All these cards are actually generated in NativeScript or NativeScript native views. I used a font that actually has a heart and a spade and a diamond, and so the letters match the whatever. So in this case, my letter is a spade, is a Q. Oops, I'm in the wrong test. Go up one. So what I did here is I looked for the message, and if we open up my app real quick so you can look at the form. It looks for the message. This is it actually is not looking for the ID message, it's looking for the automation text. I missed that part. Get the elements by accessibility ID in NativeScript is actually automation text. So whatever you want to use your ID, you have to set it as automation text inside the XML or via JavaScript. This sets the ID for the Appium to be able to find it, or even for screen readers to find it. If you're dealing with like screen readers or other accessibility things, automation text is actually the thing to set that up. So in this case, this text, where'd it go? I was on it. Sorry. It looks for the message thing, and then it asks for the text filled out of it, and it said it should become the back of should be the back of the card. So if we look at the application, and we start this up again because it quits out of it, the initial state is back of card. So that test passed, and then it should flip the card over. And again, what it does is it looks for elements by accessibility and looks for the card. And looking at this, that is this right here. Finds the automation text card. Whoops, where's the test? Right here. Wrong one, that one. And there's command should eventually exist, because this basically tells it that this element may not exist right this second, but it should exist. Once it exists, it tells it to tap on it. So just like if you were on there, it would tap on it. And so let's tap on it. And it does a cool little animation. And then it uses elements by XPath. XPath, to describe this, allows you to go through the whole chain of elements. So if you look at this card app, you actually have, actually let's look at the actual raw XML. You actually have a page, then a grid, and then a stack before you get to the card. With XPath, you can actually say, I want to look for anything that has a page. Well, it's not actually a page, and I'll get to that in a second. Anything that's basically a page, then the next element is a grid layout, and the next thing is a stack layout named card. So XPath, you can actually drill down into it, or it can be really wild card approach like I did. I said it can have any parents, but I want it to have the label with the text in it of a spade, and in this case a Q, and that would be this character here, this character here, and this character here. All three of these are actually Qs underneath. If I was to switch the font, it would say Q, Q, Q. And then it says, should eventually have a length of 3. So I'm verifying that the card actually displayed with 3 spades in it. The next one is basically the same thing. I verified that the next button actually works. And in this case, there should actually have 4 Qs. And so you have 1, 2, 3, 4. But that again verifies that all that functionality is working in my interface, that the next button worked properly. And then it should become hearts, and as you'll notice, my hearts is an R character. And you'll see that I actually tap twice on the prior button. So like I said, you can write these tests to do anything that you can imagine. You can have it hit tap, 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 go to some other element, tap, whatever. And so in this case, we'll hit prior twice, and it puts me in a king of hearts. And then it says it should have an R in there at least twice. Now, the face cards are actually a picture, but these are actually text. So it does see 1, 2, it's good. It's king of hearts. The only other major gotcha with Appium is you might notice that every one of these tests I have a return in it. If you do not return, well, let me step back 1 second. When the driver does all this stuff, it's actually a promise-based system. So if you don't return the promise when it finishes, then the test does not realize that the test is finished. And so what it does is it'll try to combine all your tests. And you can use that to your own advantage. But if you don't do this, then it will assume that the test passed. So even if your test is failing, it'll think it passed. So in at least Appium, you always want to return your after all the tests because of the promise. You want to return the promise result back to Appium so that it could actually do a test. For those who are not familiar with Mocha, I'm going to cover one other minor thing. You can actually do asynchronous tests. What you do is you just put a function, or actually this is a function that's going to end up being a function. I'll call it done. You just drop it inside the function thing there, and then when you're all done, then done. What that'll do is when the then occurs off this promise, it'll run the done function. And so this is how you can do an asynchronous function rather than using promises in Mocha. And this works for both the NativeScript unit testing and for Appium, in case you need asynchronous results. Let me see. There is one other thing I wanted to cover. For those who are unaware, NativeScript uses the native UI elements on iOS. For the example for my prior button or next button, it is actually a UI button. Underneath the things, it's actually a UI button. On Android, it is a android.widget.button. In XPath, you actually have to specify the actual Android button, the actual element. I wrote a little function called XPath where you can pass in the NativeScript name, and depending on which platform you're running it against, it'll detect that and say, oh, you're running on iOS, so you actually need UI button here. This way you can write your tests to be cross-platform. I will be committing this to Hristov's plugin so that it'll be part of it, because this will make using XPath so much simpler. And so that is one thing to keep in mind, is that these tests want the actual native unit name, not the NativeScript name. And I think that about wraps it up. Are there any questions? Sure. Okay, Angular 2 can actually use Appium for the end-to-end, and Angular 2 actually has built-in unit testing using what? Yeah, they have some. They have. I was looking at it the other day, and it's built into it, but it doesn't actually test the NativeScript code. You can still use the NativeScript unit testing the same way. To test your units in Angular 2. The biggest issue with the NativeScript unit testing actually is that you cannot test like the labels. Because it actually runs everything, all your code, but it never builds the interface. So if you're trying to unit test your label, you really have to use Appium to do your testing to verify that this value is in the label, the nice thing with Appium is you can actually simulate the keyboard, you can simulate the whole range of things that you need to. And so if you're going to test the UI side of things, you need to use Appium. If you're going to test your underlying logic, You can use both the NativeScript built-in stuff to test generic, or you can use, if you're using Angular, you can use the Angular testbed stuff that they have built in. And I believe they also are using Mocha as the underlying library that goes with their, the app, the thing starts with a P. I can't think of its name right now. Protractor, there you go, thank you. What? Oh, I'm sorry, I can't. Oh, they use Jasmine? Well, if you're familiar with Jasmine, the nice thing is NativeScript unit testing, actually, that's one of the options, is Jasmine, Mocha, and QUnit. The only reason I go with Mocha is because Appium is Mocha. And it makes it a lot simpler for me to look at the same testing style. And so that really is something your company or you will have to decide which framework you want to standardize on. And there may be a way to switch Appium over to a different test bed. I don't know. I've never looked into that part. Any other questions?
Question regarding unit testing in general. Code coverage. How do you take code coverage considering that you're doing NativeScript and all that stuff?
I don't have a solution for that one. I honestly have not really looked into that. The nice thing is NativeScript is, for the most part, pure JavaScript. I'm not sure how much you guys are aware, but even the TypeScript stuff, when you go to build your application, it actually turns it into JavaScript. And the actual device is running JavaScript. The TypeScript never gets to the, well, it's not supposed to get to the device, but everything on the device is pure JavaScript. And the XML layout, or HTML in Angular case, but the actual code running is JavaScript. So you can use the same JavaScript coverage code tools, I would guess, but I don't know for sure. I've not really looked into that one. Any other questions? Guess not.